So we'll get right on chapter 2. A wondrous thing. Lacey and Casey's eyes were as wide as the dishes on Mrs. Nice Folks' dinner table. Lacey and Casey's eyes were as wide as the dishes on Mrs. Nice Folks' dinner table. A wondrous thing. For the next 2 months, Mr. Nicefolk and Sucka Suckup harvested the herbs and carried them into the barn, then loaded the licorice, spearmint, ginseng, and all the other herbs into their special bins until the barn reeked of wonderful smells. Lacey and Casey helped after school, soon becoming friends with Mr. Periwinkle, leading him to the barn with a full load of herbs in the cart and unloading it before bringing him back to the fields for another load. They spent the evening hours after homework listening to wondrous stories by Mr. Suckup, who treated them as if they were his very own children. The days were warm and comfortable, and the weather cooperated with clear, cloudless skies with no rain. Only early morning fog that drifted in during the morning from the ocean. It was the nights that seemed mysterious. After supper, Suckup would go to the barn where he had wired a small generator to electric lights that shone all night. Soon a mystical glow surrounded the old barn. Neighbors passing on the nearby road often commented about the peculiar phenomenon of light streaming through the barn's windows. During his spare time when he wasn't laboring in the fields, Suckup disappeared into the barn and didn't come out until dawn. He built an enclosed shop with a large workbench in one corner of the barn. Despite their curiosity, the children were afraid to enter the barn when Suckup was inside. In fact, their father cautioned them to stay away from their field hand to respect his privacy. When they put their ears to the door, which became, oddly, locked, except when the herbs were brought in and later packaged, all they could hear were unexplainable tinkling and clinking noises. Then silence. Then the tinkling and clinking would resume and go on for an hour at a time before stopping again. They could not even begin to guess what their new friend was doing. Even when they were permitted to enter the barn during the workday, they found a big brass padlock on the door of the workshop, in the corner with its newly built walls. Whatever was going on inside during the wee hours of the night was most puzzling to the children. They began to suspect that Suckup had a deep, dark secret he did not wish to share with the nice folks. At last, when all the herbs were harvested, packaged, and sent to buyers, Sucka Suckup came to the door one morning and told Mr. Nicefolk that it was time for him to move on. "Sorry to see you go," said Ever Nicefolk. "We'll miss you," said I'm a Nicefolk. Lacey and Casey came and stood side by side, petting Mr. Periwinkle for the last time. "Will you come back next harvest season?" asked Casey. Suckup tugged at his long gray beard and smiled. "I never know where my travels will take me. Mr. Periwinkle and I simply follow a road until it ends, and then take another until that one ends. Should the roads take us in a circle and we arrive back here, we'll be happy to work for you again." Ever Nicefolk tried to pay Suckup a little money as a bonus, but the man slipped both hands in his pocket, saying, "I can only take what we agreed upon, but thank you kindly." Then he looked down at Lacey and Casey. "Before I leave, there's something I'd like to show you in the barn." Sucka Suckup, looking very mysterious, walked into the barn with the children trailing behind him and floopy-loping beside Mr. Periwinkle. Inside, he stopped in front of the locked workshop. Then he dug into his pocket, produced a key, and opened the door. The interior was dark, but he pressed a tiny switch on the wall, and the workshop was flooded with a light that shone with all the colors of the rainbow. The workshop was empty of all his paraphernalia. He had loaded all that on his cart. The walls and workbench were clean of tools except a small copper box with 2 levers protruding from the top. Other than the box, all the children could see was a large square mat on the floor that shimmered under the mystical light. Sucka took a toy out of a pocket on his overalls and placed it on the mat. It was a small, hand-carved model of his cart. "Now watch closely," he said in a measured voice, smiling widely, "and see what you have never seen." Then he pressed the left lever on the box. Slowly, very slowly, the little toy cart glimmered and sparkled. Next came a wisp of what looked like purple smoke, but was really a heavy mist. The mist swirled and whirled for nearly a minute, then began to scatter in a shower of tiny, glittering stars before fading away. Suddenly the toy cart seemed to grow and grow until it was as big as Suckup's real cart. Lacey and Casey's eyes were as wide as the dishes on Mrs. Nice Folks' dinner table. And that was the illustration at the beginning of the chapter. That's why their eyes were wide. They stood rooted in astonishment before jumping up and down with excitement. Then they began to calm down and wonder if their eyes were playing tricks inside their heads. Reading their minds, Suckup said, "It's real. Go ahead and touch it." Lacey was afraid, but Casey, wanting to show his sister that he was brave, approached the cart and cautiously extended his hand until his fingers touched one of the wheels. Quickly he pulled his hand back, then reached out again and ran his hand over the staked sides. "It is real," he gasped. "I can feel it." Still not fully convinced, Casey abruptly turned and looked toward the barn door. Believing that Suckup had somehow moved his cart into the barn during the mist, he ran outside. There was the cart, still hitched to Mr. Periwinkle, with Floopy sitting next to it, his tongue dangling out one side of his jaw. Returning as if in a daze, Casey stared at the second cart, then looked up at Suckup and asked, "How did you do that?" "Enchantment," Suckup answered easily. "It must be a magic trick," said Lacey. Suckup shook his head solemnly. "No trick. I have given you both the secret of enchantment. All you have to do to make a small toy big is set it on the mat and push the left lever of the mystical box. Then you must believe with all your heart that the toy will become as real as life itself." "What does the right lever do?" Casey wondered, relying on his inquiring mind. "That one makes the object tiny again. Just watch." He touched the lever, and in a puff of purple haze, the cart became little again. Lacey threw her arms around Suckup. Actually, her arms couldn't quite reach around his waist, and hugged him. Thank you for such a wonderful gift." Casey, trying to act grown-up, shook Suckup's hand. "How can we ever thank you?" Suckup smiled. "Use the gift only for good, and it will last you a lifetime. But if you use it for bad, it will vanish in a puff of red smoke." "No, no," the children cried in unison. "We will never use it for wicked things. And remember, when you are finished with whatever toy you alter, you can make it small again." "And if we don't, will it last forever and ever?" asked Lacey. "Then it will remain real," Suckup assured her. "And one other thing, this is our secret. No one else must ever learn the magic." "Not even our mother and father?" Suckup ran his hand through her golden hair. "Not even your mother and father, or the spell will disappear, never to return. Love and cherish the secret, and it will last until you're both grown up." "Not after?" asked Casey. Suckup slowly shook his head. "Then your dreams will take new directions, and the secret will fade in your mind and heart." With that, he spun on his heels and walked from the barn. He never turned and looked back as he and Mr. Periwinkle set off down the road. Lacey and Casey watched with tears of sadness in their eyes until their friend passed through the fields and became lost to their sight.